The palace halls were silent except for the soft clicking of Empress Hana's footsteps on the marble floor. She walked with her head high, her dark robes flowing behind her like a shadow. Everyone who saw her bowed low. No one dared to meet her eyes. This was how it had been for 15 years since she took the throne. Fear and respect followed her everywhere. But today something was different. Today her daughter was crying. Princess Minji sat in her chambers, tears streaming down her small face. In her arms she held a small metal creature that looked like a mix between a cat and a bird. Its silver wings were bent at odd angles, and its bright blue eyes had gone dark. The Luminar robot had been her companion since she was 4 years old. It was more than just a toy. It was her friend. The Empress stood in the doorway watching her daughter sob. She felt something uncomfortable in her chest. Hana was used to solving problems with orders and authority. But this problem could not be fixed with power alone. 3 of the Empire's best engineers stood nearby, their heads bowed in shame. They had spent hours examining the broken robot. Each one had failed to repair it. The neural bond is too complex, the first engineer said quietly. If we make one mistake, the robot's personality will be erased completely. The problem is these components, the second engineer added, pointing to small parts inside the robot. They are not Valtheris technology. They were scavenged from Earth. We do not understand how they work together with our systems. The Empress felt her jaw tighten. Earth, the primitive planet where humans came from. Humans were useful for labor and simple repairs, but they were considered too unsophisticated to understand advanced Valtheris technology. Yet now her daughter's happiness depended on understanding human engineering. Bring me someone who understands these human components, she commanded. Her voice was cold and sharp. I do not care who it is. Find someone who can fix this. The engineers bowed and hurried away. Within an hour, a dozen human workers from the Palace Maintenance Division were brought to the throne room. They stood in a nervous line, their heads down. Most of them had never been this close to the Empress before. Some trembled. The Empress sat on her throne, the broken luminar on a table beside her. Commander Jiwan, head of her personal guard, stood at her right hand. Jiwan's sharp eyes scanned each human worker with suspicion. She did not trust easily. Who among you can repair this? The Empress asked. Her voice echoed through the chamber. The humans glanced at each other. Most looked terrified. Finally, one man took a small step forward. He was thin, with dark hair that fell over his eyes. His work clothes were stained with grease and oil. He kept his gaze on the floor. I can try, he said quietly. His voice barely carried across the room. Your name, the Empress demanded. Doyen, Your Majesty. The Empress gestured for him to approach. Doyen walked forward slowly, his hands clasped in front of him. When he reached the table, he finally looked up at the broken robot. His expression changed. The fear seemed to fade, replaced by focus. He picked up the luminar carefully, turning it over in his hands. His fingers traced the bent wings and opened a small panel on its back. He studied the wiring inside for several minutes. The entire throne room was silent. Everyone watched him. This connection here is broken, Doyen finally said, pointing to a cluster of thin wires. And this power regulator is fried. That is why the neural bond is not working. The robot's memory is fine. The personality is still there. But it cannot connect to the power source anymore. One of the Valtheris engineers stepped forward, frowning. We already examined those components. They cannot be replaced. The specifications are too unusual. Doyen shook his head slightly. They do not need to be replaced. They need to be bypassed. The human parts were designed to work with improvised connections. If I reroute the power through these secondary circuits and use a basic capacitor to regulate the flow, the neural bond should reactivate. The engineer looked confused. That method is inefficient. It violates standard power distribution protocols. Yes, Doyen agreed quietly. But it will work. The Empress leaned forward slightly. There was something different about this human. He did not speak with arrogance, but he had confidence in his answer. She made a decision. Do it, she said. You have 6 hours. If you fail, you will be sent back to the maintenance division. If you succeed, you will be rewarded. Doyen bowed. I will need basic tools, a soldering iron, wire cutters, and a small capacitor from any standard power cell. The tools were brought immediately. Doyen was given a workspace in the corner of the throne room. The Empress did not leave. She remained on her throne, watching him work. Commander Jiwan stayed as well, her hand never far from her weapon. Hours passed. Doyen worked in silence, his hand steady and precise. He did not rush. Every movement seemed purposeful. The Empress found herself studying him. Most people trembled in her presence, but this human seemed to forget she was even there once he started working. He was completely absorbed in the task. As the night deepened, Princess Minji crept into the throne room. She had stopped crying, but her eyes were red and swollen. She stood beside her mother's throne, watching the strange human man work on her broken friend. Will he fix it, Mother? Minji whispered. I do not know, the Empress admitted. It was rare for her to speak with such honesty. Just before dawn, Doyun straightened up. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his hands were trembling slightly from hours of delicate work. He pressed a small button on the Luminar's chest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the robot's blue eyes flickered. Once, twice. They glowed bright and steady. The Luminar's wings unfolded with a soft whir. It lifted its head and made a gentle chirping sound. Princess Minji gasped. She ran forward and scooped the robot into her arms. The Luminar nuzzled against her cheek, its wings wrapping around her in a gentle embrace. Minji laughed through fresh tears. These were happy tears. The little princess turned to Doyen and did something that shocked everyone in the room. She bowed to him. It was a deep, respectful bow. In Valthera's culture, nobility never bowed to anyone except those of higher rank. For a princess to bow to a human was unheard of. Thank you, Minji said simply. Her voice was filled with genuine gratitude. Doyen looked uncomfortable. He quickly bowed much lower. I am honored, Princess. The Empress watched this exchange carefully. She saw how gently Doyen had treated her daughter's precious companion. She saw the skill in his work and the humility in his manner. She saw something else too, something she had not expected. She saw potential. She turned her head slightly toward Commander Jiwan and spoke in a low voice that only her guard could hear. That one, she murmured, nodding toward Doyen. Keep an eye on him. Jiwan nodded once, her expression unreadable. She understood the order. The Empress did not give such commands lightly. Doyen was dismissed with a reward of credits and a formal thanks from the Empress. He left the throne room, exhausted but relieved. He thought that would be the end of it. He had fixed the princess's robot, and now he could return to his quiet life in the maintenance division. But the Empress had different plans. As she watched him go, she made a mental note. This human had shown her something important. He had solved a problem that the Empire's best engineers could not. He had done it with patience, creativity, and skill. In the days that followed, Doyen would learn that catching the attention of Empress Hana was both a blessing and a burden. His quiet life was about to change forever. 5 days after fixing Princess Minji's robot, Doyen received an unusual summons. A palace guard appeared at the maintenance division and told him that the Empress required his presence immediately. Doyen's stomach dropped. He could not imagine why she would want to see him again. The other human workers stared at him as he left. Some looked envious. Others looked worried. Being noticed by the Empress could mean many things, and not all of them were good. The guard led Doyen through parts of the palace he had never seen before. They walked down long corridors decorated with ancient tapestries and passed through doors that required special access codes. Finally, they stopped in front of a heavy door made of dark metal. The Empress's private workshop, the guard said. Very few people have ever entered this room. You should feel honored. The door opened and Doyen stepped inside. The room was large but felt cluttered. Workbenches lined the walls, covered with tools, half-finished projects, and strange devices. In the center of the room sat the Empress. She was alone, which was unusual. She wore simpler clothes than her formal robes, though they were still clearly expensive. She looked up when he entered. "Close the door," she said. Doyen did as he was told. His heart was beating fast. Being alone with the Empress felt dangerous, though he could not explain why. "Come here," she commanded, gesturing to the workbench beside her. On the bench sat an object unlike anything Doyen had ever seen. It was about the size of a human head, made of a golden metal that seemed to glow from within. Strange symbols covered its surface, and delicate mechanisms were visible through transparent panels on its sides. It looked ancient and incredibly valuable. "Do you know what this is?" the Empress asked. Doyen shook his head. "No, Your Majesty. It is called the Heartstone mechanism," she said quietly. "It was built by the first Empress over 2,000 years ago. According to our history, it was a device of great importance, but it has been broken for centuries. Every engineer who has examined it has failed to understand how it works." Doyen stared at the mechanism. He felt a strange pull toward it, as if the device itself was calling to him. "Why are you showing this to me?" he asked carefully. The Empress stood and walked to the window. She looked out over the palace gardens, her hands clasped behind her back. When she spoke, her voice was different from the cold, commanding tone she usually used. She sounded almost tired. "Because you fixed something that my best engineers could not. You approached the problem differently. You did not follow our standard methods. You improvised." She turned to face him. "I have exhausted every conventional approach to this mechanism. I need someone who thinks differently. I need you to examine it." Doyen felt overwhelmed. This was a sacred relic of the Valtheris people. If he damaged it, he would probably be executed. But the Empress was waiting for his answer. "I can try," he said finally. "But I make no promises. If this device is as old as you say, its technology might be completely different from anything I have worked with. That is all I ask," the Empress said. "Examine it. Take your time." Over the next several days, Doyen spent hours in the Empress's workshop. She gave him access to ancient diagrams and historical texts about the Heartstone. He studied them carefully. Though many of the concepts were difficult to understand, the Empress often sat nearby, working on her own projects or reading reports. Sometimes she would ask him questions about his progress. Other times they would work in comfortable silence. Doyen began to notice something strange. The mechanism did not follow logical engineering principles. The connections between parts seemed random. The power flow made no sense according to standard physics. It was as if the device had been designed by someone who did not care about efficiency or rules. "I think I understand why no one could fix this," he said one afternoon. The Empress looked up from her work. "This device was not built with logic. It was built with intuition." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "Modern Valtheris engineering follows strict rules," Doyen explained. "Every connection has a purpose. Every part has an optimal position, but this mechanism does not work that way. The first Empress built it to adapt. It responds to changes. It finds its own solutions." He traced his finger along one of the golden panels. "It is like human engineering in a way. We do not always follow the perfect path. We work with what we have. We improvise. This device was designed to do the same thing." The Empress stood and came closer. "Can you repair it using that understanding?" "I think so," Doyen said. "But it will take time. I need to learn how the mechanism wants to work, not force it to work the way I think it should." Over the following weeks, Doyen and the Empress developed an unexpected rapport. She would ask him about human culture and technology. He would ask her about Valtheris history and philosophy. They were both surprised by how much they learned from each other. One evening, the Empress asked him a personal question. "Do you miss Earth?" Doyen paused in his work. "Sometimes, but I was very young when I was brought to the Empire. I barely remember it. This is my home now, even if I am just a worker." "You are more than just a worker," the Empress said quietly. "You have skills that my people lack. You see solutions where we see only problems." Doyen did not know how to respond to that. He returned his attention to the Heartstone. The breakthrough came late one night. Doyen had been working for nearly 10 hours straight. His eyes were tired and his hands ached. But he finally understood the pattern. The mechanism was not broken in the traditional sense. It had simply gone dormant because certain energy pathways had closed over time. He carefully adjusted several internal components, creating new connections while preserving the old ones. Then he activated a small power cell and connected it to the Heartstone's central core. The mechanism hummed to life. The golden surface began to glow brighter. The symbols on its exterior lit up one by one, creating a pattern of light. Then suddenly, the mechanism projected a holographic image into the air above it. The Empress, who had been dozing in a chair nearby, stood up quickly. She stared at the hologram in shock. It was a star map, but not just any star map. It showed regions of space that the Valtheris Empire had explored 2,000 years ago. Some of the marked locations were unknown in modern records. They were lost colonies, forgotten worlds, hidden resources. "By the stars," the Empress whispered. She walked around the hologram, studying it from every angle. Her hands trembled slightly. "This changes everything. These locations could contain ancient technology, historical records, entire populations we thought were lost." She turned to Doyen. For the first time since he had met her, she smiled. It was a small smile, but genuine. "You have given the Empire a gift beyond measure," she said. "How can I possibly reward you?" Doyen felt embarrassed. "I was just doing what you asked, Your Majesty." She shook her head. "No, you did far more than that." She paused, then spoke more seriously. "I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Would you be willing to work for me directly? Not as a maintenance worker, but as my personal engineer and advisor?" Doyen was stunned. "Your Majesty, I am just a human. The court would never accept such an arrangement." "The court will accept what I tell them to accept," the Empress said firmly, but then her expression softened. "However, you are right that this will cause controversy. I will not force you. The choice is yours," Doyen thought carefully. This opportunity was beyond anything he had ever imagined. But it also came with danger. If he accepted, he would be stepping into a world of politics and power that he did not understand. Yet when he looked at the Empress, he saw something that made his decision easier. He saw someone who was carrying an enormous weight alone, someone who needed help, even if she would never admit it. "I accept," he said quietly. "I will serve you to the best of my ability." The Empress nodded, her smile growing slightly wider. Neither of them realized yet how much this decision would change both of their lives, and the future of the Empire itself. News traveled fast through the Imperial Palace. Within 3 days, everyone knew that the Empress had appointed a human as her personal advisor. The reaction was immediate and divided. Some nobles were curious. They had heard about Doyen fixing the princess's robot and repairing the ancient Heartstone mechanism. They wondered what other skills this human might possess. Others were outraged. They saw the appointment as an insult to Valtheris tradition and superiority. The loudest voice of opposition came from High Chancellor Borum. He was an old noble with deep connections throughout the Empire. He had served 3 emperors before Hana took the throne, and he believed firmly in the old ways. During a council meeting, Borum stood and addressed the Empress directly. His voice carried across the chamber, making sure everyone could hear his words. "Your Majesty, with all respect, this decision is unwise. Humans are useful for labor, but they lack the sophistication necessary for high-level advisory roles. By elevating this one individual, you send a dangerous message to the entire Empire." The Empress looked at him coldly. "What message would that be, Chancellor?" "That competence matters less than species. That our traditional hierarchy means nothing. The human workers throughout the Empire will see this appointment and begin to question their place. Some may even demand equal treatment." He paused for effect. "We could be inviting rebellion." Several nobles murmured in agreement. The Empress remained silent for a moment, studying Borum carefully. When she finally spoke, her voice was sharp as a blade. "You speak of competence, Chancellor. Yet it was Doyen who solved problems that our best engineers could not. You speak of tradition, yet tradition without adaptation leads to stagnation. As for rebellion, I have ruled this empire for 15 years. I know how to handle threats to my authority. She stood from her throne, her presence commanding the room. Doyun has earned his position through skill and dedication. That is the only criteria that matters to me. If any of you question this, decision further. You are questioning my judgment as your Empress. Is that what you wish to do? No one dared to speak. Boram bowed stiffly and sat down, but the anger in his eyes did not fade. The Empress had won the public confrontation, but she knew this was not over. Boram had too much pride to let this go. Commander Jiwan noticed the tension immediately. She had been watching Doyun closely ever since the Empress gave her that order. At first, she had been suspicious of him. Humans were unpredictable, and one working so close to the Empress could be dangerous. But over the weeks, she had seen something different. Doyun was careful, respectful, and genuinely seemed to have no ulterior motives. He just wanted to do his work well. Jiwan found herself respecting that. Now, watching the political storm building around him, she felt protective. She began investigating quietly, using her network of informants throughout the palace. What she discovered troubled her deeply. There were rumors of a group calling themselves the Pure Blood Movement. They were extremists who believed that any non-Valthera species should be expelled from the Empire entirely. Boram had connections to this group, though nothing could be proven directly. Jiwan reported her findings to the Empress privately. They met in the secure room where no one could overhear their conversation. The threat is real, Jiwan said bluntly. Doyun is in danger, not just from political maneuvering but from actual violence. These extremists see him as a symbol of everything they hate. The Empress's expression hardened. Double his security detail. I want guards with him at all times when he is outside the secure areas of the palace. Already done, Your Majesty, Jiwan replied. But there is something else you should know. If you continue to support him openly, you will alienate a significant portion of the nobility. Boram is not acting alone. He has many allies. Are you suggesting I abandon him? The Empress asked coldly. No, Your Majesty, Jiwan said firmly. I am suggesting you be prepared for the consequences. This is going to get worse before it gets better. The Empress nodded slowly. Then we will face those consequences together. Meanwhile, Doyun was becoming an unexpected figure in Princess Minji's life. The young princess had always been surrounded by tutors and servants who treated her with formal distance. But Doyun was different. He spoke to her like she was a person, not just a royal title. One afternoon, Minji found him in his workshop, fixing a broken communication device. She watched him work for a while, her Luminar robot perched on her shoulder. Can you teach me how to do that? She asked suddenly. Doyun looked up, surprised. Your Highness, I am sure your tutors can teach you much better than I can. My tutors. Teach me about history and politics and proper behavior, Minji said, making a face. But they do not teach me how things actually work. I want to learn what you know. Doyun considered this carefully. He knew it would be seen as inappropriate by many in the court. But the princess's curiosity seemed genuine, and he remembered how she had thanked him for fixing her robot. All right, he said, but you must ask your mother's permission first. The Empress gave her approval, much to the horror of Minji's primary tutor. Over the following weeks, Doyun taught the princess basic engineering principles. She proved to be a quick learner, her small hands surprisingly steady as she practiced soldering connections and identifying components. During their lessons, Minji would sometimes ask questions that had nothing to do with engineering. Why do some people not like you? She asked one day. Doyun paused in his work. Because I am different from them, princess, and people often fear what is different. That seems silly, Minji said firmly. You fixed my Luminar. You helped my mother with important work. You are teaching me interesting things. Those are good things. Why would anyone fear that? Because good things can also change things, Doyun explained gently. And change makes people uncomfortable even when it is for the better. Minji frowned, thinking about this. When I am Empress, I will make sure people are not judged by where they come from. I will judge them by what they do. That would be a wise way to rule, Doyun said with a small smile. The princess's declaration, innocent as it was, represented something powerful. The next generation of Valtheris leadership was already beginning to question the old prejudices, but not everyone was ready for that change. High Chancellor Borum watched these developments with growing anger. He saw the Empress spending more time with the human advisor. He saw the princess learning from him. He saw the traditional order he believed in crumbling away. Borum held secret meetings with other nobles who shared his views. They discussed the situation in hushed tones, their words growing more extreme with each gathering. The Empress has been compromised, one noble said. This human has gained too much influence over her judgment. What can we do? Another asked. She has made her position clear. Challenging her directly would be seen as treason. Borum smiled coldly. We do not need to challenge her directly. We simply need to remove the source of the problem. The others understood his meaning immediately. If Doyun was gone, the Empress would have no choice but to return to normal protocols. The human had become a symbol, and symbols could be destroyed. The Empress, unaware of this specific plot, nevertheless sensed the growing danger. She called Doyun to her chambers one evening and spoke to him seriously. I want you to understand something, she said. By accepting this position, you have become a target. There are people in this palace who see you as a threat to their power and their beliefs. I can offer you protection, but I cannot guarantee your absolute safety. Doyun nodded. I knew there would be risks, Your Majesty. I am not afraid. Perhaps you should be, she said quietly. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she added, I would not forgive myself if something happened to you. The words hung in the air between them. Both of them recognized that something had shifted in their relationship, though neither was ready to name it yet. Outside the palace walls, in the shadows of the city, forces were gathering. The storm was coming, and Doyun stood directly in its path. The attack came on a quiet morning, 3 weeks after the confrontation in the council chamber. Doyun had been assigned to inspect some old power conduits in the lower levels of the palace. These tunnels were rarely used, serving mainly as maintenance access points for the building's ancient infrastructure. The air down here was cool and slightly damp, and the lighting was dim. He was accompanied by 2 palace guards, as Commander Jiwan had insisted. They walked ahead of him, checking each intersection before allowing him to proceed. Doyun appreciated their diligence, even if it made him feel somewhat paranoid. They turned a corner into a long corridor lined with exposed pipes and cable runs. Doyun was examining a control panel when he heard a strange sound behind him. It was a soft hiss like air escaping from a sealed container. He turned just in time to see both guards collapse to the ground. Standing behind them were 4 figures dressed in maintenance worker uniforms. But their movements were too precise, too military. These were not workers. One of them held a weapon that looked like a modified plasma torch. Another carried a blade that gleamed in the low light. They advanced toward Doyun slowly, their intentions clear. Doyun's heart hammered in his chest. He was not a fighter. His hands were built for fixing machines, not defending himself. He backed away until his shoulders hit the wall behind him. Nothing personal, human, the lead assassin said. His voice was cold and emotionless. You are just a symbol that needs to be erased. Before they could close the final distance, there was a sudden blur of movement from the corridor behind them. Commander Jiwan appeared like a shadow made solid. Her blade was already drawn, moving with lethal precision. The first assassin did not even have time to react. Jiwan's strike was surgical, disarming him and sending him crashing into the wall. She spun immediately to face the second attacker, blocking his blade with her own. The fight was brutal and fast. Jiwan moved with practiced efficiency, her years of combat training evident in every movement. But the assassins were skilled too, and they had numbers on their side. One of them managed to slip past her defenses and lunged toward Doyun. Doyun grabbed the first thing he could reach, a heavy pipe wrench hanging on the wall. He swung it wildly, more out of desperation than skill. By sheer luck, it connected with the assassin's wrist. The blade clattered to the floor, Ji-won used that moment of distraction to finish her opponents. Within seconds, 3 of the assassins were down, unconscious or too injured to continue fighting. The 4th one, seeing his comrades defeated, tried to flee. Ji-won caught him before he made it 5 steps. She slammed him against the wall and held her blade to his throat. "Who sent you?" she demanded. The assassin spat at her feet. "We serve the true empire, not the one corrupted by human filth." Ji-won's eyes narrowed. "Give me a name, or I will make sure you regret every second of your interrogation." The assassin hesitated. Then his resistance crumbled. "Borum," he whispered. "High Chancellor Borum provided us with access codes and payment. But he said it could never be traced back to him." Ji-won's expression became even colder. She knocked the assassin unconscious with a precise strike and turned to check on Doyen. "Are you injured?" she asked. Doyen checked himself. His arm had a shallow cut where one of the blades had grazed him, but otherwise he was unharmed. "I will survive." "Thank you, Commander. If you had not arrived when you did, I had a feeling something was wrong," Ji-won said. "I have learned to trust my instincts." She activated her communication device. "Medical team to sub-level 3. We have casualties and prisoners." Within minutes, the corridor was filled with guards and medical personnel. The 2 unconscious palace guards were revived and taken for treatment. The assassins were secured and carried away to the detention cells. Doyen's arm was bandaged quickly. News of the attack reached the Empress within the hour. She was in a diplomatic meeting when Commander Ji-won's urgent message came through. The Empress immediately dismissed everyone from the room and demanded a full report. When she learned what had happened, her rage was like a physical force. Those who had known her for years said they had never seen her this angry. She went personally to the detention cells where the captured assassins were being held. The interrogation was swift and thorough. Under pressure, the assassins confirmed everything. Borum had hired them through intermediaries, providing them with palace access and detailed information about Doyen's schedule. The plan had been to make it look like an accident, a tragic death during routine maintenance work. The Empress ordered Borum arrested immediately. Palace guards stormed his chambers and dragged him from his bed in the middle of the night. He was brought before the Empress in chains, his usual composure completely shattered. The next day, an emergency session of the Grand Council was called. Every noble and official of importance was required to attend. The throne room was packed with people, all of them sensing that something significant was about to happen. The Empress sat on her throne, her posture rigid and her expression like carved ice. Borum was brought forward, his chains rattling in the silent chamber. The captured assassins were also present, guarded heavily. "High Chancellor Borum," the Empress said, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "You stand accused of attempted murder, conspiracy, and treason. The evidence against you is overwhelming. What do you have to say in your defense?" Borum raised his head, and there was defiance in his eyes even now. "I did what I believed was necessary to preserve the purity of our empire. That human has corrupted your judgment, Your Majesty. My only crime was trying to protect what generations of Valtheris have built. Your crime," the Empress said slowly, "was attempting to murder someone under my direct protection. Your crime was placing your prejudices above imperial law. Your crime was believing that your personal beliefs gave you the right to commit violence." She stood from her throne and descended the steps until she was standing directly in front of Borum. When she spoke again, her voice was low but carried to every corner of the chamber. "I have ruled this empire for 15 years. In that time, I have faced rebellions, economic crises, and diplomatic challenges. I have made difficult decisions and accepted the consequences of those decisions. But I have never allowed anyone to undermine the fundamental principle that holds this empire together. That principle is the rule of law." She turned to address the entire assembly. "Let this be clear to all of you. Doyen is under my protection. Any threat against him is a threat against me personally. Any action taken against him will be treated as an act of treason against the crown." She looked back at Borum. "As for you, I strip you of all titles, honors, and properties. You are exiled to the penal colony on Valdris Prime, where you will spend the remainder of your life in hard labor. Perhaps there you will learn the value of work over empty pride." Borum's face went pale. Exile to Valdris Prime was considered a fate worse than death. The colony was harsh and unforgiving, meant for the Empire's worst criminals. "You cannot do this," he said, his voice shaking. "I am High Chancellor. I have served this empire for decades. You were High Chancellor, the Empress corrected coldly. Now you are nothing. Take him away. Guards dragged Borum from the chamber. His protests echoed through the halls until they finally faded into silence. The remaining nobles sat in stunned silence. The Empress had just demonstrated her power in the most absolute way possible. Later that evening, the Empress went to see Doyen. He was in his quarters, his injured arm properly bandaged. When she entered, he immediately tried to stand and bow, but she waved him back down. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "I have been better," Doyen admitted. "But I am alive thanks to Commander Jiwan." The Empress sat in the chair across from him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then quietly she said, "I am sorry." Doyen looked at her in surprise. "Your Majesty, you have nothing to apologize for. You did not order the attack. But I put you in danger," she said. "By giving you this position, by defending you publicly, I made you a target. I knew there would be opposition, but I underestimated how violent that opposition could become. I chose to accept your offer," Doyen reminded her gently. "I knew the risks. You warned me yourself." "That does not make it easier," she said softly. Then even more quietly, "When I heard you had been attacked, I felt something I have not felt in years. I felt fear." Their eyes met, and in that moment they both understood what was happening between them. It was more than respect, more than friendship. It was something neither of them had planned for or expected. "Rest," the Empress finally said, standing. "You are safe now. I will make certain of it." As she left his quarters, she knew that protecting Doyen had become more than just a matter of principle. It had become personal. And that realization both frightened and comforted her in equal measure. 2 months after Borum's exile, a new crisis emerged. This one threatened not just the palace, but the entire empire. Reports began flooding in from the outer colonies. A rebel fleet had appeared, attacking imperial installations and disrupting trade routes. They called themselves the Restoration Front, and their message was simple. The empire had become weak and corrupt. It needed to return to its traditional values and remove all non-Valtheris influence from positions of power. The timing was not coincidental. Word of Borum's exile had spread throughout the empire, along with the reasons behind it. Those who shared his views saw the Empress's decision as proof that she had abandoned Valtheris principles. The rebels claimed they were fighting to save the empire from its own ruler. The Empress called an emergency meeting of her military commanders. The war room was filled with admirals and generals, all of them studying holographic displays of the affected star systems. The situation was worse than expected. The rebels had captured 3 entire systems and were advancing toward more populated areas. How did they acquire so much firepower? The Empress demanded. These are not small raids. They have full battle fleets. Admiral Kyungsu, head of the Imperial Fleet, brought up a detailed analysis. They have been stealing weapons from our own armories over the past year. Borum's network was apparently much larger than we realized. He provided them with access codes and schedules. By the time we discovered the thefts, they had already amassed a significant arsenal. The Empress's jaw tightened. Borum's treachery went even deeper than she had thought. What is our current military response? We have mobilized 3 battle groups, Admiral Kyungsu replied. But the rebels are using guerrilla tactics. They strike quickly and retreat before we can engage them properly. Every time we try to corner them, they disappear into asteroid fields or uncharted space. Then they reappear somewhere else and strike again. The generals began debating various military strategies. Most of their plans involved overwhelming force and direct confrontation. But the Empress listened carefully, and she noticed a pattern in the rebel attacks that her commanders seemed to be missing. Doyen was present at the meeting, standing quietly in the corner. The Empress had begun including him in important discussions, valuing his different perspective. As the debate continued, she noticed him studying the tactical displays with intense focus. "Doyen," she said suddenly. The entire room fell silent. "You have been quiet. Do you have any observations?" Several of the generals looked uncomfortable. They did not like the idea of a human offering military advice. But no one dared to contradict the Empress openly. Doyen stepped forward hesitantly. "Your Majesty, I am not a military expert, but these tactics remind me of something from human history." "Explain," the Empress commanded. Doyen pointed to the holographic display. "The rebels are not trying to hold territory. They are trying to make you chase them. Every time your fleets move to engage them, they retreat. This forces you to spread your forces thin across multiple systems. Meanwhile, they concentrate their attacks on isolated targets. He gestured to show the pattern. On Earth, this was called asymmetric warfare. A smaller force uses mobility and unpredictability to wear down a larger, more powerful opponent. They do not win through direct confrontation. They win by making the cost of fighting them too high. Admiral Kyung-soo frowned. We cannot simply ignore them. They are destroying Imperial property and killing our citizens. I am not suggesting you ignore them, Doyen said carefully. I am suggesting you change how you engage them. Instead of chasing them, anticipate where they will strike next. Set traps. Use their own mobility against them. One of the generals spoke up. How do we predict their targets? They have attacked seemingly random locations. Doyen studied the map again. They are not random. Look at the locations more carefully. Every system they have hit has weak defenses but valuable resources. They are building their strength while avoiding your main battle groups. If I were planning their next move, I would target one of these 3 systems. He highlighted 3 star systems on the display. These have minimal military presence but contain fuel depots and manufacturing facilities. They need these resources to sustain their campaign. The Empress looked at her military commanders. Opinions? Admiral Kyung-soo studied the highlighted systems thoughtfully. His analysis is sound. Those systems would be logical targets. But committing our forces based on a prediction is risky. Riskier than continuing our current failing strategy? The Empress asked sharply. She turned to Doyen. You understand their thinking. If we were to set a trap, how would you suggest we do it? Doyen took a deep breath. He was stepping far outside his area of expertise, but the Empress was asking for his honest assessment. You cannot just hide your fleet nearby. They will detect that. Instead, make it look like you have removed defenses from these systems entirely. Make them think these are easy targets, but have fast response units positioned just outside sensor range. When the rebels commit to an attack, you surround them before they can retreat. He paused, then added, you will also need to leave them an escape route, but make that route lead exactly where you want them to go. Control their retreat and you control the battlefield. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Commander Ji-won spoke up. I have studied human military history as part of my training. This strategy has been used successfully many times on Earth. It is unconventional by our standards, but that may be exactly why it could work. The Empress made her decision. We will implement this plan. Admiral Kyung-soo, work with Doyen to adapt these tactics for our fleet capabilities. Commander Ji-won, coordinate with intelligence to track any rebel movements that might confirm or refute our predictions. Over the next week, the Imperial fleet quietly repositioned itself. The 3 targeted systems had their visible defenses reduced to almost nothing. To any observer, they looked vulnerable and tempting. Meanwhile, powerful battle groups waited in concealment, ready to strike. Doyen worked closely with the military planners, helping them understand the psychological aspects of the trap. The rebels needed to believe they were outsmarting the Empire, not walking into a carefully prepared ambush. The trap was sprung 5 days later. The rebel fleet attacked the Helion system. Exactly as Doyen had predicted, they moved quickly, expecting to hit the fuel depot and retreat before Imperial forces could respond. Instead, they found themselves surrounded. Imperial battle groups emerged from behind planetary bodies and asteroid fields, cutting off every escape route except one. The rebels, realizing they were trapped, took the bait and fled through the designated corridor. That corridor led them directly into a second ambush. This time, there was no escape. The rebel fleet was decimated. Some ships surrendered. Others were destroyed. The Restoration Front lost more than half its forces in a single engagement. News of the victory spread quickly through the Empire. The remaining rebel forces scattered, their momentum broken. Within a month, the uprising had collapsed completely. The Empire had been saved, and everyone knew that the turning point had come from an unexpected source. The Empress held a formal ceremony to honor those who had contributed to the victory. Admiral Kyung-soo and other military commanders received commendations. But the most significant moment came when the Empress called Doyen forward. The throne room was filled with nobles, officials, and military officers. They watched as the human engineer walked to the base of the throne and bowed. Doyen, the Empress said, her voice carrying through the chamber. Your strategic insight saved countless lives and protected the Empire from those who would tear it apart. You have proven that wisdom and capability are not determined by birth or species, but by the strength of one's mind and the courage of one's convictions. She descended from her throne and placed a medallion around his neck. It was the Star of Merit, one of the Empire's highest civilian honors. I hereby name you official advisor to the throne, with full authority to counsel me on matters of state, technology, and strategy. The room erupted in mixed reactions. Some applauded genuinely, recognizing his contribution. Others remained silent, their faces showing disapproval. But no one dared to voice open objection. The Empress had made her position clear. Later that evening, Doyen found himself on a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. He was still wearing the medallion, its weight both literal and symbolic. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Princess Minji approaching with her Luminar robot perched on her shoulder. "Everyone is talking about you," Minji said. She smiled at him. "You are a hero now." Doyen shook his head. "I just offered some ideas. The military did all the real work." "That is what heroes say," Minji replied wisely. "They never think they are special. But other people can see it clearly." She looked up at the stars. "My mother is changing because of you. The Empire is changing too. Some people are angry about it. But I think it is good. Change means we are growing." Doyen smiled at the young princess. Her wisdom belied her age. "Your mother is an extraordinary woman. I'm just fortunate to be able to help her." "She cares about you," Minji said suddenly, "more than just as an advisor." "I can tell." Doyen felt his face grow warm. "Princess, I do not think—" "It is okay," Minji said gently. "I am glad. My mother has been alone for a long time. She needs someone who makes her happy." The palace gardens at night were peaceful. 2 moons hung in the sky, casting silver light over the carefully maintained paths and flowering trees. The Empress walked alone, something she rarely allowed herself to do. Tonight she needed time to think. In the months since the rebellion had been crushed, the Empire had settled into an uneasy calm. Doyen's official position as advisor had become accepted, though many nobles still grumbled about it privately. The Empress had proven that she would not back down on this issue, and most had learned to simply accept it. But acceptance was not the same as understanding. The Empress knew that her feelings for Doyen went far beyond professional respect. She had tried to ignore them, to focus on her duties and responsibilities. But the harder she tried to deny what she felt, the more obvious it became. She heard footsteps on the garden path and turned. Doyen was approaching, carrying a small toolkit. He looked surprised to see her. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing quickly. "I apologize. I was told there was a malfunctioning fountain in this section. I did not know you would be here." "Stay," she said softly. "I could use the company." Doyen set down his toolkit and stood respectfully nearby. They walked together in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the garden. Finally, the Empress spoke. "Do you know what the hardest part of being Empress is?" she asked. Doyen considered the question carefully. "The decisions? Having to choose between difficult options where someone always suffers? That is part of it," she admitted. "But the hardest part is the isolation. Everyone who speaks to me wants something. Everyone who approaches me has an agenda. Even those who seem friendly are calculating how to use our relationship to their advantage." She paused. "Except you." Doyen looked at her in surprise. "Your Majesty, You speak to me honestly," she continued. "When I ask your opinion, you give it without trying to guess what I want to hear. When I am wrong, you tell me. You treat me like a person, not just a title." She turned to face him. "Do you have any idea how rare that is?" "I have never thought of you as just a title," Doyen said quietly. "I see someone who carries an enormous burden with grace and strength, someone who makes impossible decisions every day and accepts the weight of those choices. Someone who—" He stopped, suddenly aware of how personal his words had become. "Someone who what?" the Empress prompted gently. Doyen took a deep breath. He had spent months carefully maintaining professional distance, never allowing himself to acknowledge what he truly felt. But standing here in the moonlit garden with her, he found he could not hide anymore. "Someone who deserves happiness," he said. Someone who should not have to be alone all the time. The Empress smiled, but there was sadness in it. Happiness is a luxury that Empresses rarely afford. Why? Doyen asked. The question came out more boldly than he intended. Because every personal desire I have affects millions of people, she explained. Every choice I make creates ripples throughout the empire. If I were to. She paused, struggling with the words. If I were to follow my heart instead of my duty, the consequences could be significant. And your heart would tell you to do what? Doyun asked softly. The Empress looked at him for a long moment. In the moonlight, her usual mask of control had fallen away. She looked younger, more vulnerable. My heart would tell me to stop pretending that you are just an advisor, she said quietly. It would tell me to admit that over these months, you have become far more important to me than any professional relationship should allow. Doyen felt his pulse quicken. Your Majesty. Hana, she corrected softly. When we are alone like this, just call me Hana. Hana, he repeated, and her name felt both strange and right on his lips. I feel the same way. I have for a long time. But I did not dare say anything because I am the Empress and you are human, she finished. Because it would be seen as impossible, inappropriate, maybe even dangerous. Yes, he admitted. She moved closer to him. I have spent my entire life doing what was expected of me. I married for political alliance, not love. That marriage gave me Minji, and for that I am grateful, but my husband and I were never truly partners. After he died, I threw myself into ruling the empire. I told myself that duty was enough. She reached out and took his hand. The gesture was simple, but it felt momentous. But then you came into my life, you fixed my daughter's robot. You repaired an ancient mechanism that no one else could understand. You helped save the empire with your insight, and somewhere along the way, you fixed something I did not even realize was broken. What was that? Doyen asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The part of me that believed I had to carry everything alone, she said. The part that thought strength meant never needing anyone. She squeezed his hand gently. You showed me that real strength can include trust and partnership. That I do not have to rule alone. Doyen lifted her hand and held it carefully as if she were something precious and fragile. I do not know what this means for the future. I do not know how the empire will react. But I know that being near you makes me want to be better than I am. That working beside you feels like the most important thing I have ever done. I do not know what the future holds either, Hana admitted. But I am tired of denying what I feel. I am tired of pretending that my happiness does not matter. She looked up at him with determination in her eyes. I want you beside me, not just as an advisor, but as my partner, my consort. Doyen felt overwhelmed. The court will never accept it. There will be enormous opposition. Then they will oppose, Hana said firmly. I have faced opposition before and survived it. What I cannot survive is a lifetime of loneliness, knowing that I let fear dictate my personal choices. She smiled at him. Besides, I am the Empress. I do not need their permission. I only need their acceptance. And that can be earned over time. And the Grand Council? Doyen asked. Officially taking a consort requires their approval according to imperial law. Then I will bring it before them, Hana said. I will make my case. Some will support us, others will oppose. But I am not a helpless ruler at the mercy of my council. I have proven my strength and judgment. I will remind them of that. She stepped even closer until they were standing face to face. But before any of that, I need to know something. Is this what you truly want? Not just because I am asking, but because you genuinely want to build a life with me? Doyen looked into her eyes and saw the woman behind the crown. He saw someone brilliant and caring, someone who had been forced to hide her softness behind walls of duty. He saw someone who had given him a chance when no one else would have. Yes, he said simply. This is what I want. You are what I want. They stood together in the moonlit garden, holding hands like two ordinary people instead of an empress and her advisor. For that moment, titles and politics did not matter. There was only two hearts that had found each other against all probability. From the shadows near the palace, Commander Jiwon watched them. She had been assigned to guard duty tonight and had followed the Empress to ensure her safety. Now, seeing this intimate moment, she quietly withdrew. A small smile crossed her face. She had seen many things in her years of service, but this was perhaps the most unexpected. An Empress and a human engineer, standing together under the stars. It should have been impossible. But Commander Jiwon had learned that impossible was just another word for difficult. And if anyone could make the impossible real, it was Empress Hana. The next morning, the Empress called her closest advisors together for a private meeting. The group included Commander Jiwon, several progressive nobles who had supported her reforms, and Doyun himself. "I am going to bring a proposal before the Grand Council," she announced. "I intend to take Doyun as my official consort. I know this will be controversial. I am asking for your honest assessment of the political situation and your advice on how to proceed." The advisors exchanged glances. Some looked concerned, others thoughtful. Finally, Commander Jiwon spoke. "Your Majesty, you will face strong opposition from the traditional faction. But you also have significant support, especially among younger nobles and military officers who saw how Doyun helped end the rebellion. The key will be framing this not as a personal indulgence, but as a continuation of your policy of valuing ability over birth." One of the nobles, a woman named Hijin, who had been supportive of the Empress's reforms, added her thoughts. "Princess Minji's support will also be crucial. If she publicly approves, it will show that this decision strengthens rather than weakens the imperial family." The Empress nodded. "Thank you all for your honesty. I know the path ahead will be difficult, but I have made my decision." She looked at Doyun. "We will face this together." He nodded, his expression serious but determined. "Together," he agreed. The wheels of history were turning. What had begun with a broken robot was about to reshape an entire empire, and at the center of it all stood two people who had dared to choose love over convention, hope over fear. The Grand Council chamber was filled to capacity. Every noble who held a seat had arrived, along with military leaders, planetary governors, and representatives from major guilds. Word had spread that the Empress was bringing an unprecedented proposal before the council, and everyone wanted to witness history being made. The Empress sat on her throne, Doyun standing respectfully to her right. Commander Jiwon and her guard stood at attention nearby. Princess Minji sat in her designated seat, her Luminar robot resting quietly on her lap. The young princess had insisted on being present, and her mother had agreed. The chamber fell silent as the Empress stood to address the assembly. Her voice was clear and commanding. "Members of the Grand Council, I come before you today to seek your approval for a decision I have made regarding my personal life and the future of the imperial family. I intend to take Doyun, my trusted advisor, as my official consort." The chamber erupted immediately. Some nobles shouted in protest. Others called for order. A few sat in stunned silence. The Empress waited patiently for the noise to die down before continuing. "I know this is not a conventional choice," she continued. "I know it challenges traditions that have stood for generations. But I ask you to consider what Doyun has accomplished since joining my service." He repaired the Heartstone mechanism, unlocking knowledge that had been lost for centuries. He provided the strategic insight that helped us defeat the Restoration Front rebellion. He has proven himself a valuable asset to this empire time and again. An elderly noble named Taehyung stood up. He was one of the most conservative members of the council. "Your Majesty, with respect, this is not about his accomplishments. This is about preserving the integrity of the imperial bloodline. Taking a human as consort sets a dangerous precedent. What message does it send to the empire? It sends the message that the empire values ability and character over arbitrary distinctions of birth," the Empress replied firmly. "It sends the message that we are strong enough to evolve without losing our identity. It sends the message that the future of the Valtheris Empire will be built on merit, not prejudice." Another noble, Somin, rose to speak. She was younger and known for progressive views. "Your Majesty, I support your decision. The empire has always adapted to survive. Our ancestors would not have built this civilization if they had been afraid of change. If Doyen has earned your trust and affection through his actions, then he has earned our consideration as well. The debate continued for over an hour. Arguments were made on both sides. Some focused on tradition and propriety, others emphasized practical benefits and the symbolic importance of embracing change. The chamber remained divided. Finally, Commander Jiwon requested permission to speak. As head of the Imperial Guard, her voice carried significant weight. "I have served 3 rulers of this empire," Jiwon said, her voice strong and clear. "I have seen both wisdom and foolishness from those who sat on the throne. Empress Hana is the finest leader I have had the honor to protect." She gestured toward Doyen. This man saved her life by his actions, and he saved countless other lives through his strategic insight. He has proven his loyalty beyond any doubt. She turned to address the full council. "Some of you worry about precedent, but consider this. If we judge people by their species rather than their character, we limit ourselves. The empire grew strong because we were willing to learn from others, to adapt and incorporate the best ideas regardless of their origin. Doyen represents that principle. Rejecting him purely because he is human would make us weaker, not stronger." Admiral Kyungsoo also spoke in support. "During the recent conflict, I worked directly with Doyen. His insights were invaluable. He did not try to take credit or seek glory. He simply wanted to help. That kind of selfless service is exactly what the Empire needs." As the speeches concluded, everyone noticed Princess Minji standing up from her seat. At only 7 years old, she was the youngest person in the chamber by decades. Her voice was small but steady as she addressed the council. "May I speak?" she asked. The Empress looked surprised but nodded. "You may, daughter." Minji took a deep breath. Her Luminar robot chirped softly as if encouraging her. "My Luminar was broken. Everyone told my mother it could not be fixed. But Doyen fixed it. He did not do it because he wanted power or favor. He did it because he saw that I was sad, and he wanted to help." She looked around the chamber at all the important people watching her. "Since then, Doyen has taught me many things. He is patient and kind. He treats me like I am a person, not just a title, and I have seen how he makes my mother happy. She smiles more when he is around. She laughs sometimes, which she almost never used to do." The young princess's voice grew stronger. "One day I will be Empress. When that day comes, I want to rule an empire that judges people by what they do, not where they came from. I want to live in a world where someone who fixes things and helps people is valued as much as someone who was born into the right family." She turned to look directly at Doyen. "Doyen has been good to me and good to my mother. If she trusts him, then I trust him too. And when I am Empress, I will remember that the leaders who vote against this today were more interested in tradition than in fairness." The threat, delivered so innocently by a child, had the desired effect. Several nobles who had been planning to vote no suddenly looked uncomfortable. Princess Minji would indeed be Empress one day, and she had just made clear how she would view those who opposed her mother now. Minji sat back down, and the Empress gave her daughter a small, proud smile. The princess had learned well. The head of the council called for the vote. Each member would vote publicly, their decision recorded for history. The tension in the chamber was thick as the counting began. The vote was closer than many expected, but ultimately decisive. 57 members voted in favor. 38 voted against. 5 abstained. The proposal had passed. The chamber erupted again, this time with mixed cheers and protests. The Empress stood and gradually the noise subsided. "The council has spoken," she said. "Doyen will be recognized as my official consort. The formal ceremony will be held in 3 weeks, allowing time for proper preparations." She looked around the chamber. "I understand that some of you disagree with this decision. I ask only that you give it time. Judge us by our actions and by the results we achieve together." She turned to Doyen and extended her hand. He took it, and together they faced the assembled council. It was a powerful image, one that would be remembered throughout the Empire's history. The ceremony 3 weeks later was magnificent. The palace was decorated with flowers and lights. Representatives from every corner of the Empire attended. Some came to support the Union. Others came simply because it was historic, regardless of their personal feelings. Doyen wore formal robes that had been specially made for him, incorporating both human and Valtheris design elements. The Empress wore her ceremonial crown and robes of state. Princess Minji stood beside them as witness, her Luminar robot perched on her shoulder. The ceremony itself was shorter than traditional royal weddings, but no less meaningful. The Empress and Doyen exchanged vows of partnership and loyalty. They pledged to support each other and to work together for the good of the empire. When the ceremony concluded, the Empress addressed the gathered witnesses. Her voice carried across the Great Hall and was broadcast throughout the empire. Today marks a new chapter for the Valtheris Empire, not because we are abandoning our traditions, but because we are expanding our understanding of what those traditions truly mean. The strength of our empire has always been our ability to adapt while maintaining our core values: justice, honor, and merit. These principles do not change, but how we apply them must evolve with each generation. She took Doyen's hand. Doyen represents the future I want for this empire, a future where anyone, regardless of their origin, can rise to their full potential through hard work and dedication. A future where we are judged by our contributions rather than our birth. This is not the end of our greatness. It is the beginning of something even greater. The response throughout the empire was mixed as expected, but over time something remarkable happened. The changes the Empress had initiated began to bear fruit. More opportunities opened for humans and other species within the empire. Innovation flourished as different perspectives were welcomed and valued. Doyen established a program that paired human engineers with Valtheris technicians. The combination of human creativity and Valtheris precision led to breakthroughs in energy systems, transportation, and communication. The empire became stronger and more prosperous. 3 years passed. Princess Minji grew into a thoughtful young girl, continuing to study both traditional Valtheris knowledge and human engineering. She often told people that when she became Empress, she would continue the reforms her mother had started. One evening, Doyun and the Empress stood together on a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. It had become their favorite spot for private conversations. The stars shone brightly overhead and the air was warm with the approach of summer. "Do you ever regret it?" the Empress asked quietly. "The scrutiny, the constant pressure, the way some people still look at you with suspicion?"